Today on Locked On Red Wings, will Showtime have any magic left? Previewing Patrick Kane, Jonatan Berggren, and Olli Maatta.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's also the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as the freelance journalist for the Detroit News.
I am the freelance journalist. No, there are many of us.
On today's episode, we're going to continue player previews, talking about Patrick Kane today. We'll discuss, whether or not with a full offseason of physical training like a hockey player, as he put it, if he can maintain a point-per-game pace and how much magic he's got left, as well as he talking about Jonatan Berggren, his role on this team, and whether or not Olli Maatta can maintain that third-pair anchor that he's been the last couple years. But before we get to any of that, I got to thank you guys for making the Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel as well. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. Although we got football right around the corner, that's exciting, but it's still summer. And FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something new for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel today, FanDuel.com today to get started. Scotty, we can just dive right into it. We haven't really, probably, I would argue next to Seider and Raymond, like Patrick Kane's probably the headliner that people are most interested in us talking about. Maybe Tarasenko because he's a new acquisition, but because of what Patrick Kane did last year, his comeback from a surgery that nobody had ever come back from in a meaningful way, and also came back in a way where he was a point per game player as well, like super important to the Red Wings top six. After a full offseason of training like an athlete, as he would say, do you think he can maintain that point-per-game pace with the Detroit Red Wings?
Yes. I think that, look, I was very, very wrong about Patrick Kane going into this experience, right?
We both were.
We talked about that a lot, and Patrick Kane was a guy who we viewed at, again, I specifically, but both of us had our reservations. I think you just were at the very end, we're like, I'm kind of down. I think this actually could work. And I really dug my heels in until he started playing. And it was just a guy that's getting up there in years that was coming back from a surgery that no one had really ever come back from and been productive after. And he was phenomenal. And like you said, I guess at the very end there, maybe the production tailed off a little bit, but he's excited to get a true off season under his belt and not have the, can't do anything for most of the off season and then come back in, basically start training when the regular season starts, get signed in the middle of the regular season, etc. I am very much done betting against Patrick Kane at this point. I've done it once. I don't need to do it again. I think that there's absolutely I was going to say there's absolutely a chance, but that almost seems like negative. I kind of expect him to be one of the more productive players on the team, one of the higher point producers on the team. The deployment is probably going to be a little bit sheltered. I don't expect him, and we've talked about this a lot, especially if him and Tarasenko share a line. I don't expect that line to be out on the ice in the Wings defensive zone too terribly often. But when it comes to some special teams opportunities, obviously for Kane, and then just you want to put the pressure on the other team and get some points on the offensive side of the ice, I expect him to do a lot of work. I think there's a kind of a conversation surrounding who his other winger is going to be. I think we've kind of settled on that. That's probably going to be Vlad. But yeah, man, I'm really excited. I think he gives you some versatility too, because really, if you want, okay, we can put Cat down there, right? If we really want to spread out or change some things up, we can put him on a line with him. He's really good. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to rush to FanDuel and say that I'm guaranteeing a point per game, but I would be surprised if it was under 65 or 70 points this year. I'll tell you that. I would be surprised at this point. He's really good.
Right. I mean, even in that season in which, he got dealt to the Rangers and he was dealing with that hip issue and he was talking about how he could really only skate with one leg, he still put up 57 points that year. So, we're talking about a player who, even when he can only play on one leg, was still capable of playing a top 6 role, which is insane. I honestly could go as far. I would rush to FanDuel and be point per game at minimum.
Sure.
I know he's another year older, and I know the hip is still a question mark. Let's be honest. He played, just because he played 50 games and didn't have an incident with his hip doesn't mean that one still can't happen. But you can't worry about that because you don't know if that's such a big what if. It could happen to anybody. So I'm pretty confident that if he stays healthy, he'll be at least a point per game, which is kind of incredible to think about, that a guy at his age could be that good. But he had a 92-point season just 2 seasons ago. The season before he got dealt to the New York Rangers, he had 92 points in 78 games played. That's incredible. So, and the year before that, he had 66 and 56. So if you want to go down a year prior, and I think that was one of the bubble years where they only played 56 games, he still had 66 points. So it's if he can train like an athlete and get back to NHL, his age, but just NHL caliber at that age, I really do think that you could rush to FanDuel and say he's going to get at least 82 points this year.
Yeah, fair enough, man. I said, I'm done banging against the man. So,
well, also you got to think about his role too, right? Obviously, top 6 winger. He'll definitely play with either Tarasenko or a Cat, and he's going to be able to feed them, right? We talked about that a lot. Although this last season was actually kind of a little bit of a reverse. Cat was feeding Kane a lot of the times for his 20 goals, but Cat and Tarasenko are both huge finishers. You having Patrick Kane on the opposite wing, feeding those guys those beautiful, I don't know how he threads the needle with those passes, but he does. He's going to rack up points. I really do think, because he's going to get deployed. You got to keep in mind too, you're not putting Patrick Kane in the defensive zone as a defensive zone start, right? He might end up there, but he was the most sheltered forward the Red Wings had on their team last year in terms of offensive zone and defensive zone deployment. He did play. And when I say sheltered, I don't mean his quality of competition was tough because he was a top 6 forward. He's still playing against other top 6 forwards. But he was the only forward on the Red Wings team that finished the season with over 50% offensive zone deployments, and that was at 53%.
Right.
Because that's Patrick Kane. You want to put him in the offensive zone. So they're going to continue to put him in positions to put the team ahead on the scoreboard, and he's going to do that. So, you think about those two things together, and if that hip stays healthy, I don't see how he's not going to get 80, be a point per game player. I know that he's another year older. How old is he now? He's 35 years old. I don't know exactly when his birthday is, so I would assume that it's in November. So he'll be turning 36 early on in the season. So I know that players fall off, but he's consistently been, just like Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin, a player who is kind of timeless. And I maybe it's unfair to do this to a 36-year-old, but I'm talking about a 36-year-old that's a first ballot Hall of Famer who has all the hardware, individual and team-wise. I just have that much faith that if that hip holds up, he's still going to be Patrick Kane that we've always known and for a long time of our lives hated because he was on the wrong team. But now, as a player, we love.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, I'm really excited about it, and kind of like I said earlier, especially if Vlad is the other winger, that's not going to be a line that's in the defensive zone very often, but I think that there's a lot of potential for some offense on a Comfer, Kane, and Tarasenko line. I think there's a lot, and like I said, you can mess around with that and move Kane down, or Kane. You can move a Cat down if you want to, right? There's a little bit of flexibility that comes with that too. And then I think the biggest thing that I saw immediately where I kind of realized, okay, no, he's still incredible, was on the power play with Kane. How he controls the puck in the power play is honestly something that I don't know if I've ever seen before, from a Red Wing, legitimately in my entire life. I'm not sure I've seen someone that commands the puck on the power play quite like he does, because he isn't the bumper, he isn't the net front, he's out on the wings, but he still is kind of like the feeder. Like he's not the quarterback, but he is the quarterback. But he's
Right.
just along the wing. And the reason why he's able to do that is because he's one of the only dudes on the planet that can cross ice, pinpoint pass, right? Like he can go from drop a pinpoint pass from one circle to the other, and go to the opposite wing in a heartbeat if he wants to, and not even think twice about it. And he's incredible, and he's a big reason why I think this power play took a big step forward. And again, you're only adding kind of offensive talent to the top end of the power play, so
They need to score
who
goals
knows,
too.
man. I'm certainly not going to rule out a point per game season or anything like that from Patrick Kane this year, and I fully expect him to be one of the bigger reasons why this offense goes and produces this upcoming season.
Absolutely. We're going to head to a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about Jonatan Berggren, talking about another player who's going to be sheltered in their deployments, I'm sure. So stay tuned for that unsigned RFA next on Locked On Red Wings. I love sports, and I love it so much. I never want them to stop, and thankfully, football season is... Can we say it's here? I mean, it's not here. We're in football, NFL preseason, but like it's on TV again, so that still counts for something. And as that gets going, you're going to have more and more games to be able to bet on. And with FanDuel, they keep the sports going all year long whenever you want. All you got to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we're going to talk about Jonatan Berggren right now. Berggren played 12 games with the Red Wings last season. He had 6 points in that span, 2 goals and 4 assists. He's still currently an unsigned RFA. He is a right wing by nature. He shoots on his offside because he's a left shot that likes to shoot on his right side because he's a shooter. He's another finisher type player that the Red Wings have. He might be the biggest question mark in terms of where he'll play on this team and like what the line combo can be, because he brings a huge offensive punch to what we would imagine the bottom 6, but the bottom 6 this year looks like it's going to be geared a little bit more defensively. So I guess with Jonatan Berggren, I have 2 questions. Like, what do we see his point ceiling being at in his first full NHL season? Because again, he's no longer waiver eligible, or waiver exempt rather. He'll have to go on waivers if they want to send him down, and Steve Yzerman has said as much. Probably won't pass through waivers because of how young he is and the talent that he has. With 56 points in 53 games with the Griffins last year, 24 goals and 32 assists, what's that offensive ceiling, and what kind of line makeup would he be up on?
Yeah, all great questions. I think that when we talk about the kind of overhaul that this team saw this offseason when it comes to letting goals walk out the door, but also and bringing in, more defensive-minded players, this is a guy that obviously does not follow that and is hopefully going to be a depth goal scorer for you. He's tough, man. He really is very difficult to kind of quote unquote predict, because I think that there's a world where this dude is a borderline 20 goal scorer in your middle 6. And I also think that there's a world where he's getting, healthy, like at one point in the middle of the season, like we saw from other goal scorers that weren't very good defensively from the Wings just last season, right? Like that was something we saw from a couple different players. Like, okay, it again, at their worst, and I'm not trying to compare Berger to other players, but that is something that the Wings clearly, if you're not producing offensively and not good defensively, they're going to have no issue doing that. And I think that both of those realities are kind of like on the table with him. And so is obviously anything in between. The truth usually lies somewhere in the middle there. I think that's probably the safer prediction, would be he's a bottom 6 guy that scores some goals and can be one of your better offensive producers down there. But it's tricky as well because of, wondering how they're going to deploy him. You got better defensive players in your depth. You got better defensive players to fill out your bottom six. So who do you put him on a line with, right? And we obviously did our line prediction thing post free agency and whatnot. I think we had him on the third line in that, but like it's weird. Like you can put him with better defensive minded players, so that gives the line a little bit more flexibility. Like, this line can defend and it can also score a little bit if Berger ends up being close to what we thought or think that he can be. But in the same breath, like, you're going to put a guy who's not very good defensively out there in your own defensive zone. Like, I'm not sure you're going to be chomping at the bit to do that, even if he is surrounded by players that are better defensively. So I don't know. There's a ton surrounding him that I think is so odd. Like, there's just so many question marks surrounding Berger. I think best case scenario is, like I said, you're getting a guy that is somewhere around 20 goals as a depth scoring option, isn't a complete liability defensively, and gives you some depth scoring. But as I say all the time, like, the organization will tell you how they feel about somebody, and this is a guy that made his NHL debut 2 seasons ago, played over 60 games, and then got demoted. And I think that means something. That's not just, we didn't have a spot for him. They did that intentionally. And
right.
I'm very interested in what he does with this, what I think is honestly like his last opportunity. Like, genuinely, I think this is the last. Like, he's got to perform this year or else he's not going to be on the team next year.
I don't know. I don't want to talk about that angle because that's a whole different conversation.
We can save it. I just he's exempt. Like,
right.
If he doesn't perform this year, they clearly have no.
Yzerman has no qualms with signing guys to contracts and then dealing them when they don't perform. Obviously, Anthony Mantha being one of those guys. Philip Zadina signed a 3-year deal and then and that was mutual, right? That one, but contract termination. So, like, he has no problem signing a guy and then letting them walk right after that. But with Berggren's role, like, for me, when it comes to the point ceilings, I can genuinely see him being an offensive half-point per game player. Like, I think that's how high his offense is in the depth role. Like, that's really good. In fact, like, as an offense alone, I could see him push top 6. It's that defensive side of the puck that we talk about that holds him back from being in a role with that much responsibility. Like, we've talked about it. He's kind of the perfect Daniel Sprong replacement. A guy who can produce a lot of offense in a depth role and gets on the power play a lot and really can get a lot of production there. He had 28 points in 67 games a couple seasons ago with the Red Wings. I could see him pushing like 35 this year. I really could. But that all depends on, if he's getting enough ice time to produce that much, if he's on the power play. And again, that brings you to the question where, like, the lines are weird. And I've talked about this with, a friend of mine, and it's like he is in a weird spot where, like, obviously last year we had the shutdown line of Rasmussen, Kopp, and Fischer. We've talked about that a ton. That doesn't mean that that's going to be the shutdown line this year. Because with Jonatan Berggren, like, your fourth line, if you keep that shutdown line together, your fourth line is going to be Jonatan Berggren, Joe Veleno, and Tyler Mott. Right. Like, that doesn't make sense. Joe Veleno's a good two-way forward, but you have a winger that you only would exclusively deploy in the defensive zone with a winger we would at least think, and we don't, what do we really know, but we at least think that we would want in the offensive zone. So those two guys can't play in a line together. So something's got to shake. Something's got to move. And so the question becomes, okay, do you put him on the third line with Kopp and Rasmussen and shift that line away from a shutdown role? Because, like, Kopp's he's a half point per game player center. Like, we've seen that. Yeah, his goal scoring hasn't been there, but he had like 42 assists like a year ago, 2 years ago. So, like, we know he's a good two-way center. He's just not worth the money we're paying him. We're not having that conversation. But, like, you could shift Rasmussen, Kopp, and Berggren away from a shutdown role and then make Veleno, who's a good fourth-line two-way center, Tyler Mott and Christian Fischer, that your shutdown line. Or you can move Rasmussen onto the fourth line with Joe Veleno and Berggren and put Mott on the third line and have that as your shutdown line, but then you're demoting Rasmussen to the fourth line.
Right.
So, like, either way, somebody's unfortunately going to be playing fourth line minutes that might not deserve it.
Yeah, I think the line conversation the line combo conversation, the line combination conversation
Hey, I like that.
is a pretty fascinating one with him. I think I don't want to just retread because we've both talked about it at this point, but it is going to be interesting to see how they set him up and how they want the line that he is on to be deployed. And I do agree that he is the perfect Daniel Sprong replacement. But again, like I said earlier, Sprong is one of the guys that was like, he was getting healthy like that. I don't know if that's going to be a really high priority for the Wings. So we'll see. I'm really fascinated with how his season is going to go. I'm kind of getting similar vibes to how we and like I specifically, I guess, felt about Veleno going into last year, where it was like, hey, this is kind of put up or shut up time. And Veleno had a good enough year as to where it's like, okay, he'll be here for the future, right? Like he'll stick around. And I'm hoping that Berger can do the same thing, and he's obviously capable of doing the same thing. Where you're kind of like on the fence on him now, and it's like, again, it's really put up or shut up time for him. He's got to perform. And I hope that he does. I very much think he's capable of doing it. And I think there's a chance that he's a really important depth goal scorer for this team, a team that lost a lot of goals down the lineup card this year. So at his best, he can be a really valuable asset to this team. It's just a matter of whether all the chips kind of fall in that way, because there's certainly a lot of question marks surrounding him still too.
Absolutely. Scotty, let's head to another quick break. When we return, we'll talk about the third pair anchor, Olli Maatta. Stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, Olli Maatta has been with the Detroit Red Wings for, this is going to be his third season with us now. He had 18 points in 72 games last year, which, given his role, is nothing to scoff at. That's good production for a third pair defenseman who, they got pretty good deployments last year, I believe, just because of the fact that he played with Shane Gostisbehere. But it's pretty good production for a guy who's touted as a defensive defenseman. Going into the final year of his 2-year deal at $3 million, and at 29 years old, going to be turning 30 this season. Actually, very soon here, this month, just 11 days from now, 10 days by the time people are listening. Can Olli Maatta continue to be that third pair anchor? Like, will he continue? I guess the best way to be is like, will he continue to give us what we expect from him, or will he be supplanted by a guy like Albert Johansson?
Yeah, I like Olli Maatta, and I know that there was some question marks surrounding him when they brought him in, and I'm not sure anybody really would have predicted, that he was going to be an extension candidate, and years removed was still going to be on the third pair there. I think he absolutely can. Like, Olli Maatta is the king of like. Did you notice Olli Maatta on the ice tonight? Not really. Is that a good thing? Probably. That's probably, you probably don't want to. Like, that's probably a good thing. I think that he kind of is the perfect kind of epitome of that. We've talked a lot about the top four of this blue line, and one thing we haven't talked a ton about is the third pair, because we're pretty confident that it's set, and we're pretty confident in both of those guys fulfilling their roles. I think that Maatta is the guy that gives you a little bit more defensive mindedness and is going to be a little bit more defensively sound for a third pair defenseman, obviously. And he's going to be paired with somebody who's a little bit more offensive oriented. We'll see how they're deployed this year. I still think, and we still have talked about a lot, how that third pair is probably going to be a fixture in the offensive zone. But having a guy who is a little bit more defensive minded and not really an offensive play driver in that offensive zone, I think is really good. And we saw that a lot with him and Ghost last season, right? He was kind of the safety valve on that blue line to prevent the entire blue line from just being a complete atrocity defensively. I expect him to play a similar role this year. I don't think I expect too much different. I don't think that anyone else should really demand or expect too much different. And clearly he can do that. Clearly he can fulfill that role that he did last year. I really don't expect a whole lot of change from Olli Maatta. That is totally fine.
And you know what's funny too? Like I expect him to even be. He's a really easy player to predict because Olli Maatta is kind of Olli Maatta.
Right.
Like he plays a very specific role as a defenseman, and I think he's good in that role. So like, there's not a lot shocking. Like I expect a very similar season. Production-wise, I would expect his role to maybe, again, we've talked about it, it's the flip side of the coin with the Gustafsson conversation. Like, I expect him to get a little bit more defensive zone deployments because he and Gustafsson are the most offensive zone deployments out of any of the defensemen on the team last year. They had over, over 50% offensive zone deployment, 52% offensive zone deployment as a pair because Gustafsson was like your point producer on the back end. So Maatta, being part of his pair, was on the offensive blue line a lot too. And, that's not really a location where he thrives. So I look forward to Gustafsson and that pair maybe getting a little bit more defensive zone deployments because that's where Olli Maatta is going to do his best work. So I would expect a little bit, again, you're not going to notice him out there and you don't want to notice him out there because if you don't notice him, that means he's doing his job. But I expect him to be a little bit more better is kind of an unfair word to use because I think he's fine. But I look forward to him having a role that's going to put him in a position where he thrives a little bit more because Gustafsson will be able to take a little bit more defensive zone deployments. I think if they're a pair, and it might not be Gustafsson he's paired with, we're just making a lot of assumptions here. It could be Albert Johansson. It could be Albert Johansson and Gustafsson. But assuming he's still an everyday player on the third pair, the seventh D-man, like I think if that player is paired with Gustafsson, he'll probably still get a pretty good chunk of offensive zone deployments because of the role that Gustafsson plays. But I just think that Olli Maatta is Olli Maatta, and I like that. I think that he's a very easy player to be like, he was an effective third pair defenseman on this team, and like that's why he keeps getting contracts to play that role. I have like literally nothing bad to say about Olli Maatta. Like
Same, man. Yeah, he's you know what you're gonna get. I don't think there's too much else to say. Like we know what to expect. If he does way worse than that, then he'll probably find his role diminished and won't get another contract next time around. But
I don't think he will.
I don't expect him to do a lot better than like what we're expecting either. He's like you said, an effective third pair defenseman, and that's beautiful.
Right. I mean, Olli Maatta is Olli Maatta, and that's perfectly okay. We appreciate Olli Maatta for what he is. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think so. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.